On the email deliverability side, you should think about domains, you should think about DNS records, and you should think about all of the settings associated with your emailing. All of the settings. So you can Google that, go down that little rabbit hole. If you look at almost all really large email senders, whether it's an airline and whatnot, they're not emailing you from delta.com. They're emailing you from email.delta.com or something like that. South are the records associated with it. What are the DNS records? Have you properly set up SPF, DMARC, and DKIM? Those are email authentication elements that indicate to the recipient email server, I'm legitimate, I'm the real sender. Those are really, really important. They're not sort of details that Klaviyo suggests I do or whatever your email platform is. These are absolutely critical.
Welcome to the Ecommerce Marketing Podcast, the highly rated digital marketing podcast that provides weekly digital marketing tips and strategies from some of the world's top digital marketers and e-commerce entrepreneurs that will help you take your digital marketing to the next level. Sit back and enjoy this power-packed episode hosted by Arlen Robinson, who is an e-commerce entrepreneur and digital marketing expert with over 20 years of experience. Hey, e-commerce marketing podcast listener. Are you looking to increase traffic and sales to your website? You can do this by launching your own affiliate program. Just visit getosi.com and sign up for a free trial today. That's getosi.com. Now get ready to hear from your e-commerce marketing expert of the week as they drill down to give you details on marketing strategies that can help grow your business.
Welcome back to the E-Commerce Marketing Podcast, everyone. My name is Arlen, and I'm your host. And today we've got a very special guest, Benny Rubin, who is an email deliverability expert, 3-time entrepreneur, and is currently running the company Senders. He has extensive experience in sales, marketing, email strategy, having generated hundreds of millions in pipeline for companies like Starbucks, Visa, Coca-Cola. Him and his team have sent over 30 million emails in the past year, and he's ready to share insights on effective cold emailing and avoiding a spam folder. Benny also has a unique background in music and spent 7 years in Japan. Welcome to the podcast, Benny.
That's right. 7 years in Japan, music, all sorts of stuff. One small correction.
Yes.
We cold email. We do a lot of cold email. We do cold email for e-commerce brands, direct-to-consumer brands. Sure. I think that my bio says that we've generated interested replies and deal flow from those big companies.
Okay.
So anyone listening and thinking that I'm come from a big company background is sorely mistaken.
Okay.
Probably much like you, Arlen, who spent most of my working world building businesses, building services, and trying to avoid working for the man as much as humanly possible.
Exactly, for sure. We're doing everything we can to avoid that. But thank you, Benny, for that clarification. I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, super excited to dive in. Of course, today we're going to be talking about your main area of expertise, which is email marketing, cold emails.
Yeah.
And like we said in the bio, how do you avoid ending up in that dreaded spam folder and
Seriously.
Get click-throughs and get conversions, because that's the bottom line. Yeah, but before we dive into that, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got into what you're doing today?
Sure. So I am a B2B marketer for the most part, and that's probably a lot of people listening are selling to consumers, but we'll square that when we get there. I think most of the things that I have to say and that we'll talk about today will apply in a B2C context, especially if you're trying to build a product business or something of that sort that actually ends up with end consumers, because you can obviously go through businesses to sell to consumers. So we'll get there. But I am an accidental B2B marketer, like a lot of people that end up in B2B. I went to music school. I have my degree in music. And towards the tail end of my music degree, I got really interested in Japan. I went on a trip there and I said, wow, this place is amazing. I got to move here. So I moved to Japan and studied Japanese for a year, right around the time that all my friends were graduating from music school. And a lot of my friends went on to become professional musicians. And one of them said, hey, you should come play bass for this Sony artist that I'm going to be on tour? And I said, sure. So I went to LA and I went out on tour. And this ages me. You and I already talked a little bit how we're pretty much old timers. Well, I'm not. I don't consider myself old, but
yeah,
depending how young you are, you might.
in the tech world, I guess you could say we're
that
kind of
was
we're up
that
there.
was the summer of the financial crisis and the launch and sort of mainstreaming of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram didn't exist yet. And what we saw at that time was that was sort of the first, that 2008, 2009 period was the first time that artists went direct to consumer. So that direct to consumer thing hit artists pretty hard then. That's like Justin Bieber on Twitter all the time, that whole thing. And I just got this sense of like, wow, this is really interesting. This is really different. This is going to be really exciting. So I went as deep as I could into artist direct to fan relationships and ended up starting a company that helped Western artists communicate directly to their Japanese fan bases. And this is where I became a B2B marketer. When I got back to Japan, I said, okay, who controls the budget? Who controls the right to tweet as Justin Bieber? Oh, it's the record label. Okay, well, I better go talk to the record labels. So I walked into meetings with Sony and Universal and all these record labels, and I made a B2B sale. And that was sort of the beginning of me as a B2B marketer. And then I transitioned from doing it in the music to doing it with ad agencies, which was also very interesting. Selling to ad agencies, social media content services, who then they sell to consumer brands, who then they communicate with customers in sort of a roundabout way. So that's
right.
I built that business in my 20s and I sold it. And then I moved to the US right around the dawn of this most recent wave of influencer marketing. And me and a buddy of mine tried to build a piece of software that was sort of like Grin or something like that, like sort of influencer marketing management. We couldn't really get it going, which was fine. You know, you live and learn. Shut that down. And when I turned my attention back to all my entrepreneurial friends that I made along the way, I said, hey, what do you need help with? And they said, well, you're pretty good at cold email, and cold email is a very effective way to grow B2B pipeline. Can you help with that? So I started a company that eventually became Senders. Around 2020, we transitioned to being focused mainly on email deliverability. I got advice when I was much younger. Someone said, if you're going to do something in an industry, ask yourself, are you working on the thing that's the biggest issue in the industry, the biggest problem, the biggest thing in the industry?
Right.
And around 2020, it seemed to be that email copy sort of made sense. Email management made sense. All that stuff's great. You can run a really great business helping people manage that stuff. Email deliverability was especially thorny, and it was becoming more of an issue. So I bulked up and hired a technical team, and we went really deep on email sending and delivery. And that's mainly what our business is now. We manage the B2B sending, including the B2B sending for consumer brands. Usually between 75 and 80 companies concurrently sending, as you said at the top, probably 30 million or so cold emails in the last 12 months and going strong.
Wow. Okay. Awesome stuff. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
That was a lot. You let me talk for a long time there, I'm sure.
It's all good.
Sure, we lost some listeners there. They were like, Japan, music, bass? What's this guy talking about? I got to finish doing the dishes.
No, it's all good. Yeah, you've definitely had a diverse kind of career there, you know, kind of full circle going from US to Japan and then back to the US. And you were it seemed like you were on the cusp of a lot of changes when you were doing your different kind of launches and kind of positioning yourself in the world. And because like you said, things are different.
I mean, just like you and just like a lot of the people listening, if you're listening, you sense changes in the market.
Right.
Sometimes people look at trend reports and they go, aha, that's the thing. But oftentimes that's not where business comes from. Business comes from you saying, well, that's weird. I have this expensive product, but people are buying 5 times the number of hooks for the product than they are buying the product. Maybe there's a need for these hooks. Why are we building this expensive thing that we can't make a profit on when we make, 10x on these hooks? Let's just start a hook business. Like that's usually how these things come about. It's not like someone wakes up and goes, I've
Mhm.
always wanted to start a bathroom hook business or something.
Yeah, exactly. That's not usually the case.
Yeah,
Well, of course, today it's all about email marketing. And, of course, as you know, many people that are listening have known, because we've had this conversation before, email it's kind of had I guess you could say, a resurgence. I don't know if it's ever went anywhere, but I think it seems to be more, um, kind of in the loop of marketing
yeah,
conversations and marketing strategies than kind of ever before. So I wanted to see, could you walk us through how email marketing could just really enhance the different stages of a customer's
sure,
journey, from them just becoming aware of a company to then post purchase?
sure.
How does that work?
Email's beautiful. Email's beautiful because it's actually owned by no one.
Yeah,
It's essentially a public utility. It's baked
true.
into the fabric of the internet. And there are very few things that are in your way when you want to use email. People sometimes go afoul of, let's say, Google's filtering or something like that.
Yeah.
That's kind of a rarity. I think a lot of the statistics you read about, like some large number of emails are going to spam or not being delivered at all, they're not actually talking about legitimate opt-in consumer brands that are sending emails. It's actually pretty rare if you think about even the past week or two, when you
Mhm.
clicked password reset or someone said, "Hey, we'll send you a confirmation email," and you actually did not receive it.
Yeah.
Maybe these days, maybe that happens one out of 50 or one out of 100 or one out of 200 times.
Right. Right.
So email is still very reliable. It's a really efficient way to get things into the inbox. And there are very few things that are essentially owned by the customer that they check
Mhm.
as often as they do their own mailbox that sits in front of their house. They check their
Mhm.
email inbox. So it's one of these places where consumers are. There's competition in that space for sure. There's lots of people sending emails, but
Right.
that's where they are, and that's where they are every day. And last time I checked, it doesn't cost any money to get Google to deliver an email.
Mhm.
It costs money for them to show your ad to someone. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But the email is essentially free. I mean, there's costs involved in it, and we all know, everyone who has a Klaviyo account or something like understands that
Sure.
there's utilities that sit on top of email that do cost resources. But essentially, it's still open and free, and there are very few things in the world that actually are open and free.
Mhm.
So it makes sense that it would always be around, and it would make sense that it's constantly being checked and constantly being looked at, because there's important information that also goes to people's email inboxes. So it has a
Right.
place in every customer journey, whether it's B2B, B2C. Then on top of that, in the B2B side, which is what we do a lot of our emailing, on the B2B side, we saw a very strong emergence in the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years of chat being the dominant way that people do work
Yeah.
rather than email.
Mhm.
I don't know how young or how old the audience listening is, but in the good old days that weren't quite so good, you used to do all your work in email.
Yeah.
There was other work to be done, but email was an internal tool and an external tool at the same time. So when you'd cold email someone or you'd send them a marketing email, they'd be kind of annoyed, because they would think, look, this is my workspace. I'm waiting for an email reply from my boss or whatever.
Mhm.
But now
Exactly.
almost all that stuff moved to chat, which means that email is being used for the thing that it's actually, well, you're using email with your brands in the same way that email is being used by the customer, meaning they go there to find the sale email. They go there to see the item that they put in their cart but they forgot about. They're going there to check their tracking information for this external thing. They're not really going there to communicate with their mom and dad, brother and sister. That's what text message is for. So
Mhm.
email actually changed to being more useful for marketers and more useful for consumers, because consumers are using it to access the bits of marketing or whatever. And the same thing happened in a B2B context
Right.
too. So it became this kind of serendipitous thing where email actually changed functions over the last 10 years and became more useful for marketers.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we hope that there's a lot of choice by consumers that they can opt in and opt out and do all this stuff that they should be able to do. But
Yeah, that's very
emails are,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah,
email's
interesting that you
great.
say it is, and it's interesting because I think from what you're saying is when chat came about, we have all these live chat platforms, and we had the SMS and the text messaging, all that. For a time period, people were like, "Okay, what's the purpose of email? You know, is email going to go away?" It was all of that talk about the email is dead and it's going to go away. SMS is just going to kill it. But I definitely understand what you're saying. It gave email a different place because people will know, all right, you know, truly important things. I still need to check my email. We got the rise of all of these um, auto pay type systems when you know, you're with your electric company or your Visa
Sure,
bill
yeah.
and all of that. You're getting these confirmations, and all that's just coming straight to email. And so they're always going to have a place to check it, and are always going to have the mindset where, you know, there's going to be some important things there. I'm going to always check it, but you know, to get that quick response, of course, yeah, you have the chat, you have the SMS. So it's I really understand what you're saying. It just has made that actual shift, and my lights are flickering. Hopefully, the power doesn't go out. It made that quick shift. So yeah, interesting that you mentioned that. I had never heard it kind of broken down quite like that. I'm always all about lessons learned and kind of looking at examples. And
Sure.
I know you've probably have a ton of them that you could share as far as successful campaigns. And just wanted
Sure.
to see, is there any specific example of an email campaign that you've either worked on that you're familiar with that truly improved customer loyalty and
Sure.
conversions at the same time?
I think that we've worked with a lot of brands that have consumer elements to them, and the consumer element was going strong. They're either selling through Amazon or they're selling direct from their own e-commerce site on Shopify or whatever. And they get a sort of surprise series of larger orders. And when they investigate, they realize that it was a business that was purchasing. So I'll
Mm-hmm.
give you an example. There was a company that made a sports equipment, and they sell one or two because that's the number that the family purchaser needs.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get an order for 200, and they
Yeah.
go, whoa, someone went to the shopping cart and they clicked the up button 200 times, and it's not a
Mm-hmm.
mistake. You know, you send them an email after, like, did you mean to order two? And they're like, no, we have a church picnic, we need 200 of these because this is
Right.
the main event for Saturday. And you just go,
Right.
whoa, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in that scenario, you sort of realize very quickly that there's a B2B sale to be had for consumer brands. And that can come in
Mm-hmm.
many, many forms. But in the case of that sports brand, they said, we need to cold email all the churches, and we need to cold email all of the schools and all the private schools and all the private high
Mm-hmm.
schools. And we need to see if they're interested in incorporating this product into their mix of products that that they buy for their sports activities.
Mm-hmm.
So those sales are really interesting because they're so much larger. They're so much more outsized than any purchase that anyone would do. And it usually only takes a cold email or two, no HTML. We're talking plain text emails that say,
Mm-hmm.
hi, first name, hi, Arlen. Recently, we've been getting an uptick in orders from church groups. And so we're reaching out to churches in the area to see if they'd like to incorporate this equipment into this. Same thing for bathroom products, office
Mm-hmm.
products, for almost any product that sort of
Yeah.
makes sense. We
Yeah.
offer bulk pricing. Happy to send over a custom pricing proposal if this is something that you'd be interested in. That's a
Mm-hmm.
totally different kind of sale than the normal customer journey of figure out a way to wave your hands and get a customer to come to the page. Try
Yeah.
to navigate them through some sort of process. Try to capture their email. Try to get them to make the sale. Try to sell to them again.
Mm-hmm.
So we've seen quite a few really interesting transformations of companies that have figured out this B2B side can actually be very, very lucrative.
Mm-hmm.
The sales cycles are much longer. It's not always fun to try to
Right.
make a big bulk sale.
Mm.
But email is key to this because just like with consumers, every single working adult has an email address that they use at work to communicate with outside vendors, and you're a potential outside vendor and you're dropping a note in their inbox.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
we've seen countless pretty remarkable large scale orders that can come through this
Mm.
kind of process, whether it's for food and beverage brands or sports brands or even physical companies that provide an in-person service if they're sufficiently diversified across geographies. Anyone that's an influencer, anyone that's a business person that influences, there's potential to
Yeah.
reach out to them on a B2B basis.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And it's something that I think, like you said, a D2C brand, they are not necessarily thinking about that. They're not thinking about the B2B world because, like you said, there's a lot more into it. The sales cycle is longer.
Sure.
Your pitch strategy is different. You got to kind of restructure your bulk pricing. You got to figure out, okay, can we supply this amount? How
Sure.
would it look on our end dealing with our suppliers and all that? So there's a lot more into it. So I think a lot of times brands, uh, they don't necessarily position themselves to be able to do that. But like you said, if they get a order and they see 200 of these items in the cart, and they realize that it is something real after they confirm it, that kind of changes everything. They're not necessarily going to walk
Sure.
away from that and say, okay, we can't fulfill this.
Well, there's
They're gonna do
also, you also have to remember that a lot of these companies, they don't think, businesses don't think like consumers.
Mm.
Meaning, if you email them, if they want to make an order and the order is too large, and you email them and say, hey, we can fulfill that at a lower price, but you're going to have to wait 6 to 12 weeks, a lot of businesses will say, great. If you say that to a consumer, you lose a lot of consumer interest. If you say,
Yes.
oh, we'll sell you that pair of jeans, but it'll be there in 12 weeks, a lot of people will be like, you know what, it's okay, I'll buy a different one or whatever.
Yeah,
But in the
exactly,
B2B world,
exactly.
it's not that uncommon. You say, hey, we can ship you 20 units now and we can do the other 180 after our next production run.
Yeah,
So,
that's typical.
that's not unheard of. Also, to have a purchase order where the payment terms might be 50% upfront and 50% after, which is unlike a lot of retail, wholesale, where they pay
Right.
you long after. These
Yeah.
folks might say, yeah, if you pay, the first $4,000 in the order, we'll secure your order and we'll deliver it. So you can negotiate terms. You can really have a thing with it.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's so much budget that's being controlled in the B2B world. And I think that everyone these days, especially working folks, have some sort of working budget from their office, and then they have their household budget. And those two things oftentimes are separate, meaning
exactly.
someone might have something at home that they really like, and they might use their company credit card to buy the same thing for their office.
Right.
And then the facilities person would say, well, that's a really useful light. Maybe we should get that for all the employees. And then it becomes a B2B sale, and it all comes from regular consumer activities.
Yeah, exactly. Where it's just kind of, it organically becomes like of that B2B sale. It's not necessarily something that it was, positioned to be. It was a direct to consumer.
Yeah. And one easy way to start for people listening, if you look through all of your purchases, the email addresses of all the people who purchased, and just pick out anyone that's emailing from a work email address.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then you could fire up a cold email to a person that's in the category, not that specific person necessarily, but people in the category. Like, let's imagine you got an email from someone purchased from Spotify.com. Like, they just used their work email because that was the most convenient. Okay, well, that's a huge company. And if your product matches with something that could be useful for them in a facilities context, well, go online. Find out if there's facilities people around. Email them and say, hey, we've been getting orders from employees of yours. Maybe there's potential for this to be useful for you, or you want to stock this in your fridge in your offices, or whatever the angle is.
Yeah.
That's a great place to start, just to see. And you already have a sort of proof point, a sort of bottoms up sale momentum you can play with.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great strategy for sure.
And
Yeah,
guess
just
what? That
example.
email will cost you exactly $0 because you can just
That's
open up
true.
your open up your Gmail account, and
That's
one
very
email is not going to
true.
hurt your email deliverability or anything. It's
N-
just
not at all. And speaking of deliverability, that's
yeah.
of course your expertise, and that's
Mhm.
also a hot topic, of course, when we're talking about cold email. And I've watched countless videos about cold email and read a ton of marketing blogs about it. In your opinion, what would you say is the most critical aspect of email deliverability that a lot of
Sure.
marketers overlook during the customer's journey?
Probably thinking really deeply about who you're trying to communicate to and
Okay.
whether it's welcome enough. It's not opt
Mm.
in, it's cold. It's
Yes.
a cold
Yes.
solicitation.
Hmm.
I think that thinking about affinity groups is a really good place to start. So, an example of that is, let's say you sold 1,000 items to a mega church in Wisconsin, and you
Hmm.
wanted to cold email every church in Wisconsin. Well, there might be thousands of churches. That might be a lot of email.
Hmm. For sure.
So you gotta set your place. Are your SPF, DMARC, DKIM, or all the technical backend stuff in your email in good standing? Are
Okay.
you sending it from your main domain, or are you going to do a
Mm.
subdomain?
Mm.
Subdomains are very common in email marketing as well. Use
Okay.
probably best practices to go deep on that. Set up a new subdomain. Start the emails very slowly. You're emailing churches in Wisconsin, so right away you have an affinity. You say, "We
Mm.
just sold to whatever this big church in Wisconsin.
Mm.
They've heard of the church because it's a big
Yeah.
church. I'm emailing other
Yes.
churches in Wisconsin to see if they'd also be interested. Granted, I know
Mm.
that they're not going to be making as large of
Mm.
an order as they did. That's very unlikely to hurt your deliverability, and it's very
Yeah.
likely to get a very high response rate,
Right.
assuming the email is properly cleaned. You're not abusing Google or
Mm.
Microsoft's email systems in order to get these emails out. You're not too
Mm.
impatient. You're not dropping 1,000 emails in a single day. You're
Yep.
working up to it. So I would say really start with the stance of, if I had a magical door knocker and I could knock on the office door of every single one of these companies, would
Mm.
they look at me totally confused? Or would they be like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, yeah, sure, let's
Hmm.
talk?
Exactly. Yeah, that's some great feedback, Benny. One of I think what you're kind of talking about is almost like it's not really cold. It's cold email, but it's almost kind of like lukewarm because you're saying you're opening up by saying, we sold to the X church in your area that people are probably already familiar with. So just by saying that, you're warming it up, even though it's cold. That person has no idea who your company is, what you're about,
Yeah.
but you're setting that the premise there of we did this for this company or this church in that area, and we could do this for you. So it
Yeah.
does it
And
does kind of warm it up a little bit, I think.
and keep in mind that affinity groups work in kind of mysterious ways.
Yes.
So location is one very clear way. That's almost like a demographic thing. It's like
Hmm.
you are also in the same state and you're a church. Those two things overlap. Therefore, I'm cold emailing you. Or
Right.
we sold to this university in your state, and therefore the university uh, in the same state makes an affinity group. But affinity groups also work outside of location. So let's say you sold to a very large Baptist church. Okay, well, now if you email every Baptist church in the country, maybe there's enough an affinity to bridge the gap in their mind to being like, okay, this doesn't feel super cold or super,
Yeah.
just like with universities. We had a client that sold to, it was a bathroom product, and they sold to an art school, a very large order.
Hmm.
And okay, well, art schools, there's a lot of art schools. Great. Well,
Hmm.
that's an entry point to reaching out cold to other schools. It just so
Yeah.
happens that you sold to an art school, but
Yeah,
maybe the art
exactly.
school is 250 years old, and it's a state funded. Okay, well then you reach other people. We've sold to state funded schools, so now you're emailing state funded schools. So you're just picking different adjectives from the same client to create
Hmm.
that affinity for the new folks that
Yeah.
you're emailing. I
Yeah.
think that
Yeah.
that
I like
approach
that.
tends to get the sender's head in the right place.
Hmm.
because it's a lot easier to be a friend of the groom than a
Yeah.
friend of the groom at a party,
Yeah.
at a wedding
Exactly.
party.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
I'm
That puts you a
second
little that
cousins
puts you a
with.
little bit closer to the groom.
Yeah, and when people ask a
Yeah.
question like, "Oh, what brings you here?" Like, "Oh, I'm a date of the, you know,
Right.
my
A
wife's a
date.
friend of the best man." And you're like,
Right.
okay, like this seems really far. So the
Exactly.
closer you
That.
can sort of make it feel, the more likely it is
Mm,
to resonate with your
yes.
audience.
For sure. For sure. Well, Benny, as we get ready to wrap things up, one of the things that a startup business, let's say they're an e-commerce business,
Yeah,
fresh out of the gate, they know email marketing is kind of crucial for them. What would you say are the top 3 things that they should do before even thinking
sure.
about launching an email marketing campaign?
On the email deliverability side,
Mm,
you should think about domains. You
okay.
should think about DNS records. And you should think about all of the settings associated with your emailing.
Okay.
All of the settings. So if it's in Klaviyo, are you going to be doing a subdomain? It's probably best practices to start with a subdomain early on. So you can Google that, go down that little rabbit hole.
Hmm.
If you look at almost all really large email senders, whether it's an airline and whatnot, they're not emailing you from delta.com. They're emailing you from email.delta.com or
Exactly.
something like that. Southwest Airlines is like something like ilove.southwest.com or something.
Hmm.
That's a subdomain structure. You should investigate that and figure out if that's a good choice for you. If you have a
Okay.
web product that goes along with your consumer product, what are the email domains that your password change emails are going from?
Hmm.
That also should probably have its own subdomain. Could be transactional dot or something like that. So that's
Hmm.
important. Then on the back end of your email, what are the records associated with it? What are the DNS records? Have you properly set up SPF, DMARC, and DKIM? Those are
Hmm.
email authentication elements that indicate to the recipient email server, I'm legitimate, I'm the real sender. Those are really, really important. They're not
Yeah.
sort of details that Klaviyo suggests I do or whatever your email platform is. These are absolutely critical. Maybe in the
Yes, for
past they
sure.
weren't as critical, but they become more and
Yeah.
more critical
Yeah.
now.
That's what I've
So
seen lately.
that's the second thing I think is really important. The third thing is, are you in a sort of vice industry? Are you vice adjacent?
Hmm.
Are you trying to be edgy? Are you trying to be super interesting? Try to follow best practices.
Hmm.
Try to understand that there's no reason why you don't want to give the email overlords a reason to put you in the spam filter. So sometimes
Hmm.
being too edgy can cause that. So
Yeah.
be aware of that. Be
Yeah.
aware of what you're trying to say. I would say those are all pretty important very
Yeah.
early on. And then the other thing I would say is if you're really having trouble with email, you should absolutely consider the abundance of email experts out there. There is really an expertise with email,
Hmm.
especially with email deliverability, but even just email marketing. And a lot of marketers, good email
Hmm.
marketers, understand all the ins and outs. The other thing I would say, and this is a sort of final thought on this, is there's a really heavy feeling on the internet that
Hmm.
everyone that sells something, especially to direct to consumer marketers or e-commerce folks, they try to convince you that their thing is the only thing. Like, of course, email is the thing. That's going to be the thing that's going to make you all of the monies. That's going to,
Right.
rain down on you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
most very good businesses have a diverse source of clients. So
Hmm.
that means email might not be super. It's important to check the box and it might become something important for you. But in early days, something
Hmm.
like OSI, an affiliate program, might actually serve you better faster because an affiliate program has built-in audiences. So you might be
Hmm.
leveraging your affiliate network who then reaches out to their own audiences that bring you people to your website to make purchases, and that actually may serve you better sooner than an email program. In the long run, an email program is beneficial and you should probably run it anyways.
Sure.
Same thing goes along with some sort of text messaging program if that's something that you're exploring, or a Google Ads program or a Facebook Ads program or anything. What you ideally want to do is have 2, 3, or even more different sources of leads, and each has their own cost per lead. And the average of all those becomes something that's very profitable for your business. And if you over-index on one, so you get really into email and that's your holy grail, that's your golden goose, and something happens with your email deliverability, well, what do they say? You'll be, out of luck, and that's not good.
Yeah.
So consider, those listening, if you don't have an affiliate program set up, consider what OSI can offer or any other affiliate program out there. But probably OSI is your first stop. You're listening to this podcast after all. So go check that out and understand how affiliate might be able to drive leads to your business. Take email very seriously, and then all the other different channels you can get together. Don't over index on any one channel, I would say.
Yeah. Great advice. And awesome tips. Thank you for the plug on the OSI affiliate software for sure. But yeah, that's definitely a way to go initially. But email is definitely should be there, but at some point. Well, this has been an awesome conversation, Benny. I've definitely learned a ton. Before we close things out, I always like to switch gears just so we can get to know you a little bit better. If you don't mind sharing one closing fun fact about yourself that you think we'd be interested to know.
Man, fun fact about myself. I play violin and viola as well.
Okay.
But I have a soft spot in my heart for the band Megadeth.
Okay.
I'm not a metalhead, but I really love the band Megadeth.
Okay.
Which is a completely useless fact that you can carry on. And if you were thinking Megadeth, I haven't listened to them in a long time, or I never have, I would start with the album Countdown to Extinction. I think that's my favorite Megadeth album.
Okay. Interesting. So, all right. You have a background in music, play the viola, but you love the band Megadeth. I wouldn't have guessed that. For sure. Yep. You never know. Well, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Benny. I appreciate that. Lastly, before we let you go, if people want to reach out to you and pick your brain any more about email marketing, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Sure. My name's Benny, Benny. And you can reach me on LinkedIn. I have curly hair, Benny, and my company is called Senders. You can email me, benny@senders.co. And our website is senders.co, and you can, lots of information on there, as well as a place to reach out to us and schedule a meeting with one of our team members.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that, Benny. We appreciate it. And we'll have those links in the show notes for sure.
Thanks so much, Arlen. This was fun.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you for joining us at the Ecommerce Marketing Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Ecommerce Marketing Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with everyone you know. Are you looking to take your digital marketing to the next level, but are tired of weeding through countless YouTube videos with unproven and untrusted marketing strategies? Well, we have the answer for you. The More Sales Every Month online digital marketing course. In this information-packed course, you will learn effective keyword research, link building, content marketing, and much more to attract and convert your site visitors into paying customers. Just go to moresaleseverymonth.com and sign up today for a low one-time fee. In addition to this power-packed course, if you would like to get access to a growing repository of digital marketing articles, PDFs, and ebooks, check out getosi.com/resources and opt in to get full access to our library of priceless marketing information to help you take your digital marketing to the next level.